The Anarcho-Christian Podcast, evaluating the relationship between the Christian and the state.
Give us a king to rule us when you're gone. His life's work had been to help the people understand it's not the role of a man to rule over other men.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the show. It seems every Independence Day we get reminded about an otherwise forgotten psalm. Well, one ripped out of context verse from that psalm, really. But when we are ready to sing the hymns of the Republic and let everyone know exactly which chunk of land on the entire planet is God's favorite and whose citizens are divinely favored above all others, we turn to our annual Psalm 33:12, ripping out of context festivities. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, the people whom he has chosen as his heritage. We usually see this verse in pictures accompanied by a United States flag or recognizable monuments in Washington, D.C., making it very clear that the nation that Psalm 33 is referring to is the United States, after 1776. It drives me crazy today, but I have to remind myself that I was there too one time. I would have loved to see that reminder that my country, and therefore me, was loved by God. It's sort of an affirmation of his blessings and his promises, and who doesn't like that? It's an assumption that it's all about us. And it's amusingly that same American narcissism that people of other countries loathe. Not only is there a lot of preconceived notions and assumptions that surround this particular eisegesis, that robs the text of its intent by creating this hyper-statist interpretation, but as I dug into this psalm in particular, I realized that it actually had a lot to say to the very opposite of what's implied with the use of this text. Okay, I used one of those $2 theological terms, and maybe we should define that. Eisegesis means to read personal ideas and biases into the text, rather than reading the meaning out of the text, based on context and hermeneutics, which is called exegesis. So let's get a little context on Psalm 33 before diving into some of the specific points that are made. So from my study Bible introduction at the beginning of the book of Psalms, and with a little help from the Bible Project's overview on Psalms, I made a few notes. Interestingly, the book of Psalms is the largest collection of ancient lyrical poetry in existence. Although they do not appear ordered in any particular way, they are divided into 5 books and can be categorized by different themes, and a few different theological categories including praise, laments, prophecy, and everyone's favorite, the imprecatory psalms, which call down God's wrath and judgment on enemies and have memorable lines like, "O God, break the teeth in their mouths, and pour out your indignation on them, and let your burning anger overtake them." There are 150 psalms, and almost half of the psalms were written by David, as in King David, which is also the same David from the David and Goliath story. There are some other writers that are noted at the beginnings of some of the psalms, and a few that are anonymous. Psalm 33 doesn't have an author attributed to it, so it is split between some scholars that think it may have been written by David, or it may have been written much later. So let's get into the text, and if you're not driving or jogging, feel free to open up or log into your Bibles and flip to or type in Psalm 33, and let's see if we can find out what nation this psalm is talking about, and if there is anything else it may have to say in context to our nationalism. I will be reading from the ESV, as it's my personal go-to translation, but feel free to use whichever you feel comfortable with. Psalm 33, 1 through 3. Shout for joy in the Lord, O you righteous. Praise befits the upright. Give thanks to the Lord with the lyre. Make melody to him with the harp of 10 strings. Sing to him a new song. Play skillfully on the strings with loud shouts. All right, these first 3 verses are just a great praise song that's instructing us to make a great praise song. Verses 4 through 9, for the word of the Lord is upright, for all his work is done in faithfulness. He loves righteousness and justice. The earth is full of the steadfast love of the Lord. By the word of the Lord the heavens were made, and by the breath of his mouth all their host. He gathers the waters of the sea as a heap. He puts the deeps in storehouses. Let all the earth fear the Lord. Let all the inhabitants of the world stand in awe of him. For he spoke, and it came to be. He commanded, and it stood firm. Yeah, that is what praising God is all about. Proclaiming all the amazing attributes of God is a good reminder of who he is, which can unfortunately get lost when we are thinking about ourselves and our wants. Verse 10. The Lord brings the counsel of the nations to nothing. He frustrates the plans of the peoples. What? If I have Psalm 33 printed against my American flag, it must mean it references the United States. What's this about bringing the counsel of nations to nothing? Bring the sum total of wisdom and authority of the nations of earth to be valued as nothing? Well, this must be talking about someone else's nation. But my t-shirt says that Psalm 33 is referencing the United States. I mean, referencing frustrating the plans of the people kind of reminds me of the Tower of Babel, but that was so long ago, way before 1776. It must be referring to that. The plans of the U.S. are to be a Christian nation, so it must be talking about frustrating someone else's nation. But let's keep reading. Verse 11 and 12. The counsel of the Lord stands forever, the plans of his heart to all generations. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, and people whom he has chosen as his heritage. That's right, there it is. There's the United States right there. God bless America, right? Well, if y'all listened to episode 66 on who is God's nation, you would know that this verse is definitely not referring to the United States. If you haven't heard it, I recommend maybe pausing this now and checking it out. But long story short, the United States is not the blessed nation that this is talking about. There are 2 ways Christians can read this, then and now. The first way, then, is referring to the nation of Israel. This was the only nation that God was the Lord. And looking at it now, which nation has God as its Lord? As we went over in episode 66, the nation today that God is the Lord is the church. It is believers. It's Israel, the true spiritual Israel, not a political ethno-geographic state located in the Middle East. 1 Peter 2:9, speaking to Christians, but you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Christians are always trying to figure out how the Old Testament applies to them today, and there's nothing wrong with that, as long as we get all the references right. This is the verse that's commonly misapplied. But let's go a little further and see if there is anything else we can glean from this psalm. Verse 13 through 15. The Lord looks down from heaven. He sees all the children of man. From where he sits enthroned, he looks out on all the inhabitants of the earth. He who fashions the hearts of them all and observes all their deeds. Another great refrain extolling how awesome God is. How much more he is above us. It's something I know I can spend more time thinking on and reminding myself, and I'm sure I'm not alone. These verses remind us of his omnipresence and his omniscience, his ability to be everywhere and know everything, and his sovereignty in fashioning all hearts. As other books in the Bible tell us, that he can harden or change hearts from stone to flesh. Again, excellent stuff that we should remind ourselves every day. But then we come to verse 16 and 17. The king is not saved by his great army. A warrior is not delivered by his great strength. The war horse is a false hope for salvation, and by its great might it cannot rescue.
No king is saved by an army. No warrior prevails by strength. A war horse provides no safety. Its might can rescue.
I think we should pause here. This is the other information I was alluding to. Not to dismiss the very important verses of God's attributes, but this is something relevant to the statism that is associated with this psalm. It's funny because we impose this U.S. reference to verse 12, and I think it's good if we're honest about what exactly it is that makes the United States stand out as amazing and awesome and God-blessed. And as I said, if we're being honest, all of this is in reference to the military might. The context of the God's blessed nation in verse 12 is usually associated with Independence Day and all of the national symbolism. The context is usually placed within the U.S. American Revolution, a war where we, the United States, was of military superiority. And of course, we maintained that over the years to become the greatest superpower in the world, which is obviously the fruit of God's blessing. We hold these two simultaneous reasons for our victories, God's blessings and military might. And the simultaneous holding becomes a confusion that our military might is God's blessing. This is why we have to keep up our military presence all over the Middle East, and the prevention of future terrorist attacks must be a sign of our blessing from God. Whether we see it or not, the American Christian places their hope and assurance of salvation in the might of its military strength. We may not be singing God Save the Queen or God Save the King, but we, the people, know that if there is a threat, our largest military in the world is what we have to defend ourselves from it. And we do, in fact, have the largest military in the world. The U.S. spends more on defense than the next 11 countries combined. As of 2021, our military budget was $778 billion, which is larger than China, India, Russia, the United Kingdom, Saudi Arabia, Germany, France, Japan, South Korea, Italy, and Australia. And remember, this is all of them combined. It's humorous because you'll hear Americans say, well, we have to have a large army or this larger military budget to beat Russia. Or if China is in the news that week, it's China. Or a few years ago, it was ISIS. So we need the current military size and spending to defend ourselves against any one given nation or military at any given time. Yet we have a budget that exceeds all 11 next largest militaries simultaneously. And maybe that sounds awesome to the pro-war Americans, but really, not only are most of these countries considered allies of the US, but if we think we will get attacked by the next 11 largest militaries at once, we might want to reconsider what it is we would be doing to draw the ire and military aggression from the majority of the military power in the world. And of course, that leads into the next verse, that the war horse is a false hope. Or in our case, the cavalry, the Air Force, a tank battalion, they are a false hope. The sort of nationalism we've addressed and see so prominently in the American church puts our hope and faith in our military might and the salvation it brings. All too often we forget Ephesians 6:12. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. What that means is that the real enemy of the nation of God is not an earthly nation. And when we look to the war horse, the strong military of our earthly nation, it becomes an idol. The psalm is finished out with 5 more verses showing God's steadfast love as the antithesis to the idol we are making of our earthly, national, militaristic strength. Behold, the eyes of the Lord is on those who fear him, on those who hope in his steadfast love, that he may deliver their soul from death and keep them alive in famine. Our soul waits on the Lord. He is our hope and our shield. For our heart is glad in him, because we trust in his holy name. Let your steadfast love, O Lord, be upon us, even as we hope in you. So that was our dive into Psalm 33. I think now you may have a little bit more background and context if it's brought up. Maybe you're debating with someone whether or not the United States is a Christian nation, and Psalm 33 verse 12 gets brought up. You can address that head on. Exactly who is this nation that's God is the Lord? But before we end this episode, I'd like to bring up a few more things around Psalm 33 that you might be interested in. C.S. Lewis points out something interesting from this psalm in his book, Reflections on the Psalms. He says, "Another result of believing in creation is to see nature not as a mere datum, but as an achievement. Some of the psalmists are delighted with its mere solidity and permanence." He then says that God's work is watertight, faithful, and reliable, and not at all vague or phantasmal. He then quotes Psalm 33, verse 4 and 9 as evidence. All his works are faithful. He spake and it was done. He commanded and it stood fast. That's just great stuff to reflect on. And as we're looking to some of the verses in this psalm for what does give us hope, it should be this reliable, permanence, faithful work of God. Charles Spurgeon is another favorite for this podcast. We've had a couple of episodes on his anti-war statements. And he also wrote a commentary on Psalm 33. I'll have a link to it in the show notes, but I'd also like to read the notes from the verses that we addressed for the nationalism and militarism. Spurgeon says of verse 12, "Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. Israel was happy in the worship of the only true God. It was the blessedness of the chosen nation to have received a revelation from Jehovah. While others groveled before their idols, the chosen people were elevated by a spiritual religion which introduced them to the invisible God and led them to trust in Him. All who confide in the Lord are blessed in the largest and deepest sense, and none can reverse the blessing. And the people whom He hath chosen for His own inheritance. Election is at the bottom of it all. The divine choice rules the day. None take Jehovah to be their God till He takes them to be His people. What an ennobling choice this is. We are selected to no mean estate, and for no ignoble purpose. We are made the peculiar domain and the delight of the Lord our God. Being so blessed, let us rejoice in our portion and show the world by our lives that we serve a glorious master." Verses 16 and 17 are about the king and the military strength. Of those verses, Spurgeon said, verse 16, "There is no king saved by the multitude of an host." Mortal power is a fiction, and those who trust in it are dupes. Serried ranks of armed men have failed to maintain an empire, or even to save their monarch's life when a decree from the court of heaven has gone forth for the empire's overthrow. The all-seeing God preserves the poorest of his people when they are alone and friendless. But 10,000 armed men cannot ensure safety to him who God leaves to destruction. A mighty man is not delivered by much strength. So far from guarding others, the valiant veteran is not able to deliver himself. When his time comes to die, neither the forces of his arms nor the speed of his legs can save him. The weakest believer dwells safely under the shadow of Jehovah's throne, while the most mighty sinner is in peril every hour. Why do we talk so much of our armies and our heroes? The Lord alone has strength, and let him alone have praise. Verse 17, a horse is a vain thing for safety. Military strength among the Orientals lay much in horses and scythed chariots. But the psalmist calls them a lie, a deceitful confidence. Surely the knight upon his gallant steed may be safe, either by valor or by flight. Not so. His horse shall bear him into danger or crush him with its fall. Neither shall he deliver any by his great strength. Thus the strongest differences are less than nothing when most needed. God only is to be trusted and adored. Sennacherib, with all his cavalry, is not a match for the one angel of the Lord. Pharaoh's horses and chariots found it vain to pursue the Lord's anointed. And so shall all the leaguered nations of the earth and hell find themselves utterly defeated when they rise against the Lord and his chosen. Well, I think that about addresses everything I wanted to bring up from Psalm 33. The music for Psalm 33 that you've heard today is from the Psalms Project, and it can be found on YouTube. I will have a link to it in the show notes, along with all the other things I referenced today. So what did you think? Let me know on any of the various social media spaces where you catch anarcho-Christian content. Don't forget to subscribe to the Anarcho-Christian podcast on whatever podcast you're using. If you're not sure where to find us, visit anarchochristian.com/subscribe. There you'll find links to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Android, Google Play, Spotify, and YouTube. If you're enjoying the podcast, please consider letting us know by leaving a 5-star rating and review on iTunes, or wherever you catch the episodes. Also, like and share the episodes on Facebook or the other social media sites. You can support the show with a monthly donation through Patreon or Subscribestar, or a one-time donation through PayPal. You can visit us on those sites, or you can visit the Support the Show tab on anarchochristian.com. That will take you to a page where you can find the links to Patreon, Subscribestar, and PayPal. So I think that's it for today. Grace and peace. No king but Christ.
He cried out to God, won't you help them to believe? This power is illusion, the need to rule is greed. Your love and your light is really all they need. It's really all we need.
Thank you for listening to the Anarcho-Christian Podcast. Subscribe to our email notifications at anarchochristian.com, like us on facebook.com/anarchochristian, and follow us on Twitter at anarchoxp. Subscribe to our podcast and YouTube to join us next time as we continue to evaluate the relationship between the Christian and the state. No king but Christ.
God said there's a season for every single thing.
The Lord alone has strength, and let him alone have praise.
Shout for joy in the Lord, O you saints. For praise from the godly is beautiful. Lift up praise to the Lord on the harp. Make melody to him with an instrument of 10 strings. Sing to him a new song, play skillfully with a loud noise. Sing to him a new song, play skillfully with a loud noise. Breath of his mouth, he heaps up the waters to fashion the seas. He stores up the ocean like treasure. Let all of the earth fear the Lord. Let all the inhabitants of the world stand in awe. Stand in awe. Let all of the earth fear the Lord. Let all the inhabitants of the world stand in awe. Stand in awe. For he spoke and it was done. He commanded and it stood firm. He brings the counsel of the nations to nothing. He thwarts the schemes of the peoples time and again. Only the purpose of the Lord will forever stand. Of Yahweh stands forevermore. The plans of his heart to all generations. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. The people is chosen as his own. The Lord looks down from heaven. He sees all the sons of men. From his throne he looks out on everyone on earth. He who fashions every heart. He considers all their works. He who fashioned every heart. He considers all their works. Saved by an army, no warrior prevails by strength. A war horse provides no safety, its might cannot deliver. No king is saved by an army, no warrior prevails by strength. A war horse provides no safety, its might cannot deliver. No king is saved by an army, no warrior prevails by strength. A war horse provides no safety, its might cannot deliver. No king is saved by an army, no warrior prevails by strength. A war horse provides no safety, its might can rescue. Behold, the eye of the Lord is on those who fear him and hope in his unfailing love. He will deliver their soul from the grave and keep them alive in the faith. is our hope. He is our shield. For our hearts shall rejoice in Him, because we have hoped in His holy name. Let your love, oh Yahweh, surround us as we hold